Good evening and welcome to the January 14th, 2025 meeting of the East Long Meadow Town Council. I'd ask that we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I would ask that we take a moment of silence to reflect on the events going on around the world and at home, especially the Palisades fire in California. Thank you. In accordance with Mass General Law, this meeting is being recorded by LCAT, and I would ask if there's anyone else in the audience recording, if you could identify yourself.
22 no's.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have public comment. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to make a comment this evening? Okay, seeing none. Council comments. Does any councilor have a comment this evening?
Actually.
Hey, well.
So just wanted to let the board know that I was invited to be a part of a Zoom meeting today with our deputy town manager, a couple of the members of the Centertown District Steering Committee, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and Bill Rayel, who led the discussion basically on 40R. Very informative. We were able to ask all different types of questions. The meeting was put on wonderfully, and I want to thank Rebecca for asking me to be a part of it. A lot of questions got answered, and it was very well attended. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ralph. Anyone else?
I'd like to make a motion to to take the agenda out of order and move directly to agenda item number 6, communications, correspondence, and announcements, recognition of the Rising Star Award recipient.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Oh, actually, we're on Zoom, so we have to do a roll call. Jim?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Kathy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Our next item is the recognition of the 2024 Arlie Rising Star Award recipient. At this time, I would ask Donna Prather from our Recreation Department to come forward. Hey.
Donna Prather, Rec Director. Jess Stacy, Assistant Rec Director. Thank you for having us. I know you have a lot on your agenda today, but I appreciate you taking time out to hear about Pine Knoll Day Camp. Last year about this time, Jess was looking for ideas on what to do with our kiddos at camp this summer, and she came across a program called Arlie. Arlie turned out to be a huge win for our staff and our campers. And so I'm going to let Jess tell you a little bit more about Arlie.
So kind of like Donna said, it was literally about a year ago today. I was sitting at my desk and I said, we really need something. We need something bigger and better than what we have. And I know I was a teacher before this, the worst nightmare summer slide. The kids go off, they lose a good portion of what they've learned academically through the year. So we wanted a component that we could mix education with the physical activity and the fun that camp would provide. Arlie was the perfect fit. Couple of Google searches and I stumbled across it. We sat in on some webinars and our kids really dove in, arts and crafts, nature hikes, literal physical fitness exercises. They got to go on like guided tours and see really cool places across the world that they may never see. And we thought it was great. And with that, we would like to introduce Tony and his team from Arlie who are here to talk a little bit more.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us here tonight. I'm Tony Battaglia, President, Chief Operating Officer at Arlie, and I'm here with Bill McCarthy. He's our Regional Sales Manager and is the one that helps secure the relationship here with the Pine Knoll. So Arlie is a leading nonprofit in youth development. Annually, Arlie recognizes outstanding individuals who are dedicated to success for youth development. There are 2 award categories that we have. One of these is the Rising Star Award, which recognizes an emerging leader in youth programming who demonstrates ongoing and exceptional growth and a commitment to the collective impact of the program. Each year, Arlie reviews nominations from our programs across the country for each award category. We have cross-functional panel of Arlie team members who conduct a blind review of all the eligible nominees and scores them on how the nominee creates impact on youth and exemplify our organization's core values in the course of their work. We are proud to celebrate the 2024 Rising Star Award winner who has made tremendous impact on youth in East Long Meadow through her role in helping implement Arlie for the Pine Knoll Day Camp. I'm going to just mention in the opening comment, the Arlie core value and how this person performed it towards that value. And it's excellent information on what was really involved in the process. So I want to read it to make sure that you understand what exactly took place. Pursues the mission with energy and purpose. By coming in each morning to prepare all the lessons and materials for each camp group well in advance, including completing the project herself to have real-time examples for other staff members. Innovates bold, intuitive solutions by using Arlie resources to help campers experiencing behavioral changes regroup and center themselves through creative activities and discussions. Embraces personal responsibility by planning all lessons, varying the activities, discussions, and physical exercises each day in 6 groups over 8 weeks of camp, impacting over 500 youth here in the community. Promotes collaboration, trust, and inclusiveness by pre-planning each schedule with individual participants in mind. If she knew what the group for the camper would struggle with competition of activity, she would find ways to pivot and adjust activities so that the campers and staff could participate together. Empowers results and impact by checking with all camp groups throughout the day to oversee activities and discussions, lending a hand and expertise, and involving herself directly so the kids could see how fun it was. And Arlie for all. She made the program an experience instead of making learning a chore, which is usually a difficult thing to do, especially in the summertime. So she really shifted the culture of those campers and really making an impact on those individuals in the success for their life. So to me, this sounds like someone that truly deserves an award, but all that she put in. So congratulations to Elizabeth Edwards, the 2024 Rising Star. Oh,
Amazing.
here's a beautiful award that you can proudly display in your house. It says 2024 Arlie Impact Rising Star presented to Elizabeth Edwards, exemplifying excellence, learning, respect, courage. Congratulations. Well, I'll be there. Any questions?
There's more. Turn it over to.
Thank you. And then also on behalf of Town Council, we, the Town Council, offer our sincere congratulations to Elizabeth Edwards as a recipient of the 2024 Arlie Rising Star Award, which honors dedicated individuals making an extraordinary impact on their children in their community. In witness thereof, I affix the town seal on this 14th day of January 2025.
Fantastic. It's awesome. Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna picture with this.
Yeah, I'm gonna get the kids. We got some kids here to support us.
Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
We do that.
Oh, Mike, right in front.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I was.
if you guys want.
Right in front of
Here.
Are we getting in the picture?
Yeah,
Right in front of the inside here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Come on
Right in here.
Oh, we're in the back.
Yeah.
It's only the way around. Yes, we're taller. I was gonna say.
Are tall.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, but
Oh, come on over, Tom.
Next, so, need you to move just a little bit. Yeah, good, Ralph. This young man just moved over. So It's a big crew. Hold on, I have to keep going back. This is the one. All right, here we go. One time. And where's my kid? Savannah, right there. Let me get a focus. And I want to make sure I get everyone. Okay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Right there.
Yeah.
So much.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Donna, that was so awesome.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, that's all my stuff. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm gonna fart. Oh,
What are these things?
that was so sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, this was.
So
So Jessica.
Just.
That's fantastic.
Sorry, thank you.
Oh, thanks for moving it.
Gonna put it back.
I just steer people on what to do.
Yeah. I do all day. It felt like it's back where they found them.
Yeah.
Microphone.
Everything.
Okay. Before we move back to town manager report, under communications and correspondence, I do have one other thing was the committee appointments. I had sent a message to all of the counselors asking if there was anyone interested in the bylaw review committee, and I know Ralph mentioned his name, but if there's anyone else on the council that's interested, if you could let me know. And then also, if there's anyone interested in serving ex officio on town's capital advisory committee this week. Interested, let me know on that as well.
As I mentioned to you on the phone, I'm willing to try. 3:00's tough, but I'm willing to try if no one else is interested.
I appreciate that.
See what I can do.
Great. All right, so back to town manager report. Tom.
Good luck, Paul.
I was gonna say. Lost my audience. Good evening. Happy New Year, everybody. Again, big congratulations to Elizabeth. We were just kind of saying, I think we probably could do a little bit more of recognizing the people in our community that go above and beyond. So congrats to her. That was a very nice thing. So I have attached to the report. It seems like we haven't been here in 6 weeks because we haven't. 5 or 6 weeks of reports for the high school. Plenty of progress. The report that's not in there is the one showing all the steel that's already been put up. They're flying over there. It's starting to look like something pretty great. So all those reports are attached, and there was a report also for the natatorium as well. It looks like those are going to start coming in pretty regularly as well. The town manager's office recently contracted with Tom Pine Communications for a communications audit. So I attached the executive summary to the 100+ page report plus appendices. I think Ralph's had it for 2 days. He's probably done, so you can ask him.
Haven't even opened it.
So obviously, this audit sort of highlighting our strengths, and I love how he didn't say weaknesses. He said opportunities for growth in our communication practices. Obviously the final goal being to improve our connection with our residents and businesses and employees of the town. This has sort of been a common theme for years, I guess, trying to get the right message out to everybody. To be transparent and let them know what we got going on at all times. So there's plenty of suggestions on how to push some of these goals forward. And so we'll be trying to do some of those in the last half of this fiscal year. And probably budgeting for some things possibly in the new year. Centertown District met on December 12th to identify the limits of the proposed Centertown District. The committee deliberated using the maps created by the public at one of the forums, as well as all the information that's been gathered up to this point from the public. The proposed boundary basically is essentially mimicked the business, commercial, and industrial properties surrounding the Rotary, west on Maple, and south on Shaker Road. The committee is going to meet again January 29th to sort of start constructing the language for the rules and regulations of that proposed new zone. We also partnered with West Mass Development to discuss funding options for cleaning up 70 Maple Street. West Mass provided analyzation of the site with short and long-term goals for redevelopment. So there was a comprehensive review of existing site assessments and environmental conditions, information that we received from the previous owner and the like, and DEP, obviously. And we've also applied and accepted into the UConn TAB program for the spring semester, which provides technical assistance for these grant application and funding options. So I expect to meet with our student rep towards the end of the month here to start that process. But completely free. It's a nice collaboration with UConn. The town is also pleased to welcome our new building commissioner, Will Cahalane. He started at the end of December. He comes from us from a brief stint in the private sector, but extensive experience as a building inspector for the city of Springfield. We're excited to have Will join the team and swing by his office in Town Hall and welcome him, say hi. He's never there, obviously, because he's out in the field. We also have a very big project going on at Maple Street I told you about earlier. So if he's not in his office, he's probably there. We're well into planning for the budget for FY26. Kim, Rebecca, and I have had multiple meetings trying to forecast and plan for revenue and expenses for this year. Department heads submitting level 1 budgets by this Friday, with the exception of the school department, who waits for the initial budget from the governor for their numbers, and then we'll be meeting with everyone after that to kind of go through everything and see where we land. We have like I said, another upcoming events, Centertown District Steering Committee meeting Wednesday, January 29th, right here at 6. And that's pretty much all I got today. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions?
Through the chair.
Sure.
With West Mass.
Yep.
Is that a printed out report to analyze the current conditions? And
There was a deliverable in the form of a report. Yes.
is there any way I
Yep.
can view that?
You may. I'll send it to
I
everybody.
told you it's been a long winter with no snow.
I guess. You want to start in on the budget?
Already did.
All right. Shocked.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Tom? Okay, thank you, Tom.
You got it.
So we do have a public hearing scheduled for 6:15. I do expect it might take some time, and seeing that the school committee is here for the session, it's up to the council if we wish to move out of order.
Sure.
Fine with it.
Is there a motion?
I would make a motion that we move out of order to 8B1, which is the town council and school committee discussion per Charter Article 6, Section 1, to go back to our public hearing when completed.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Anna,
Yes.
Yes, Marilyn,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
and Kathy.
Yes.
Okay. At this time, we have our joint meeting with the town council and the school committee for the charter, Article 6, Section 1, to begin the annual budget process.
I appreciate the president asking the question to move us up while we're sitting watching you answer the question. So, for moving us, we appreciate that.
All of us.
Yeah, take one more. Yeah. As you know, or most of you know, typically we would be posted for this meeting as the school committee, which would allow us to didn't have an open discussion with you. Unfortunately, as of Sunday, we were not posted, and so we are not here as an official school committee meeting. And so we are here just Antonella and myself from the school committee, Pam Blair, our assistant superintendent for business, and Gordon Smith, our superintendent. We have a brief handout that we can give for you tonight. We know you have some information that you got prior to the meeting. We're certainly here to answer any questions. And speaking with Connor, he's been gracious enough to offer an opportunity to perhaps come back on February 11th as a full committee and meet our full requirement as a joint meeting and give the other school committee members an opportunity to use questions.
Thank you.
Kathy, I apologize. I don't.
Hold it up to the camera.
Scan it quickly at the post.
So as many of you know, we have met some unique challenges in FY24. Some of our costs have escalated significantly. We've had to fill the gaps through our circuit breaker funding, some of which was rolled over from the prior year. And we've also used some of our school choice money to fill in the gaps. On the paper you see there, we have, do you want to go over that, Pam, a little bit, or?
I can start in on
Okay.
it. Gordon's a much better speaker than I am. What I will say is that I guess what I would like everyone to know is that our budget is pretty much half of the town's budget, and it is about $36 million. 17% of that is for the operating side of the budget. And I'm sorry, what did I say?
Operating.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. 83% of our budget is for the salary side of our operating budget. 17% of that is for the expense side of the budget. I guess the biggest thing that I would like you to know is that 17% is about $6 million to run the district beyond the salaries. And when you look at this chart that I put here in front of everyone, I did a color coding so that it would be very clear. The green is operating budget line items within the school department budget for special ed expenditures that are non-salary. That amount is $3 million. That's half of the operating budget side, the expense side of our operating budget. It's significant, and even that may not be enough. In addition to that, for special ed expenditures, you'll see in the blue there that there's another $4 million in other revenue sources. Most of that is the circuit breaker reimbursement funding, which is 75% that we get back from the state in reimbursement. There's a dollar threshold, which I believe is about $52,000, and it's a per pupil amount. So we look at each individual student with special ed expenditures, and they have to have eligible qualifications to be able to get this reimbursement. And then over that $52,000 threshold is what we get back from the state. Did I get that all right, Gordon?
Absolutely. Perfect.
That's another, you can see, and we can roll over one full year circuit breaker revenue, which is what business managers and school committees try to do so that we can offset the next year's budget. We were able to roll over $1 million, which is great. You can see that on the spreadsheet. But in addition to that, I'm also projecting that we're going to need to expend the $1.6 million in revenue that we're getting in this year, which means I'm not going to have that $1 million to roll over. So that's very significant. We're still looking at all the weeds of, there's many, many moving pieces, just like on the town side, the school side, there's many, many different pieces. And I've been diligently working on the budget, which is why I look so tired these days. But anyways, that's another story. So, we don't have all of the numbers, but we know that this is pretty significant. In addition to that, on the very bottom line there on the blue portion, you'll see that we had to use school choice revenue of $496,000 that we have already reclassified for expenditures because we already know that we need that. Thank goodness we had the school choice. Just as a reminder, school choice, the district did not do that for many years. I think it was about 17 years. And then recently, I think it was 21 or 22, school committee every year votes on whether we participate in school choice. And that is a revenue source that can come back to districts. They look at class sizes because the school committee can decide how many slots at what grade levels. And we always want to be careful of that because we don't want to have to add additional staffing. So we started by adding, I think it was 15 slots or 8 slots. So every year we're looking at that. The revenue source that comes back to the district is $5,000 per student. And in addition to that is a special ed increment. So if that student was receiving special education services, there'd be an additional revenue that would be on top of that. So because we accumulate for a few years, luckily we had that there. I am projecting that will hopefully, it is a projection, maybe roll over about 450,000 in that revenue source. So, that's the biggest piece there that I guess I wanted you all to know. I did give the circuit breaker, the history there so you could see how that has changed. And if you look at that first column, you'll see how, the eligible expenses back in 2013, it was, I don't have my glasses on, silly me. It was, what's that figure for? Thank you. 3.3 million. And now here we are at 4.2 million. But the revenue, if you look at the revenue, that's not increasing as high as quickly as does that make sense, as the expenses? So that's pretty significant. We are hoping that the legislature will increase circuit breaker. There's a few letters out there from many different organizations, and I can share those with you if you'd like. There's one letter where all the different organizations, special ed, superintendents, business managers, school committees, all collectively wrote a letter asking for additional funding. We have some serious concerns and issues out there in the school district that certainly Gordon can speak to better than I can, but being in all of the leadership team meetings, hearing what principals say, and then seeing what's happening behind the scenes, there's some serious behavioral issues out there that, and it's not just us, and it's not just Massachusetts, it's nationwide, I do believe. So, we are no different than any other district, but we do realize that, the town has its constraints as well and its challenges. So what I did want to make notice before I flip that page over is that transportation was added in the special ed circuit breaker reimbursement. It was just added, I think, 2 years ago, Gordon. So we're just like reaping those benefits now, because it can be very significant. If we get an out of district placement, along with that comes transportation costs, and they just can creep up very, very quickly. However, we've only received 44% reimbursement for the transportation portion. And one of those letters that I was referring to is asking the legislature to try to get that up to 75%, because that would reap us. I'm not exactly sure of the exact number, but I do think it's close to $200,000 with just that line item. So if you flip over the page on the other side, I guess I just wanted you to see what we're all seeing on our end here. These are actual vendors out of district private schools. I didn't list the name, I just listed the vendor number, but I wanted you to see in FY24 what we were expending and in FY25 what we're expending. And you can see the difference there, $2.6 million to $4.1 million. It's an increase of $5 million. The bottom section there is the contracted services. We talked about all of those behavioral issues throughout the school. Well, if we don't have, because we have tried diligently, school committee not wanting to increase staffing, we try to look at the bigger picture. Is this a short term? So you know what I mean? Is this because we're coming out of COVID? Is this all going to change? So
we didn't have staff and we need additional services, so we had to do contracted services. What you can see here is again, 2000, and we need to look at two funding sources. When I do look at contract services, we have the operating budget, but we also have circuit breaker reimbursement. So I looked at the two of those for contracted services and just wanted to show everyone what this actually has gone. In 2016, it was $547,000. This year, 1.7. That is a projection, but those funds are encumbered or expended to this point. So again, I just thought it was crucial to show you these numbers because they are very large, and we need to talk about it because it definitely is going to have an impact. We have a solution to get through this fiscal year, but that solution is not going to be there next year. So that's what I have.
So everybody sees what that solution that Pam was talking about. If you go back to the other page in the blue, it's the FY20 circuit breaker, the 1.0 that is now expended completely. The 1.6 is what we actually got or received from circuit breaker for the full year. So you can expect to spend that anyway and receive something similar to that next year. But that 1.0 won't be there, plus the 496 was inserted later on to backfill for that too, which was an additional funding. And if you look on the other side, it directly kind of relates to that deficit created. So, we're not sure on the number yet. There are some other opportunities, but gives you an idea of the situation that we're kind of looking at for next year. And not only that, but contractual obligations, for all salary increases and such too. So that comes along with it. So.
I know it's a lot.
It's about how we feel.
Yeah.
We all look tired these days.
I think a lot of it will depend on the state. As we all mentioned, other districts are in the same boat and are facing increased costs. So
That's all.
yeah, to think that the pool of money is going to increase exponentially at a state level, we can hope. But as we said, it's not unique. So to think that that's going to be our panacea. We really need to look internally and to think about how we might be able to fund some of these things and also some efficiencies as always, as we always do. And we'll continue to do that. Hopefully have some more ideas if we do come back for the February meeting.
I would like to say it's great to start these sorts of conversations sooner than later. So I'm glad that we're able to collaborate on all of this. And I do appreciate all of the materials that you guys have presented to us so far. It's been very in-depth and enlightening to kind of see how all of the breakdown happens. And it is illustrative too that you've worked so hard in the current fiscal year that we're still actively in to make things work without having to come to us. And you're definitely
And that's a real thing, Connor. We have come back in the 16 years I've been on the committee. We came back one time and it was for extenuating circumstances for special ed costs. This year we had opportunities with other funding means, but it's a unique thing. It does happen, and that happened once before. And so now we need to look at it the same way, I'm hoping, in terms of budgeting next year. How do we fund some of that? It'd be like almost coming back mid-year, but we're working it into the budget, if you can look at it that way. I know it's a lot to ask, but we have to educate all our students, and these are real costs. And these special ed costs we have to meet. We cannot choose to not meet those. So anything that is not funded will come from other areas. Just to keep that in mind too.
do you have a brief overview from the town perspective?
Yeah, I mean, sort of an extension of the school department's budget is no different than almost all the other departments' budgets. The salaries are carrying the day. We did a great job collectively, I think, last year, sort of reining in our expenses. Contractually, we're sort of bound by these contracts that during COVID and the 3-year spans of negotiating these things, again, everyone's in the same boat because when everybody comes to the table, they grab all the contracts of everybody all around. So when one person gets one thing, so does the next person and the next person. And, the justification is it's sort of fair. And we make this argument all the time about keeping our people. And I think if you ask everybody sitting here, every single one of our people is talented and worth it. And it's hard to match up the expenses with the revenue, especially when the expenses are outgrowing the revenue. So from the town side, again, it's all one side, I guess, but I think we really, at some point have to start this year, we're going to start looking at a little harder is the other half of the budget, which is the revenue side. We spend a lot of time in our meetings and financial oversight talking about the budgets and the expenses and how do we keep these down. There's another side of that, and that is raising money, which we don't talk about a lot. And there's not a whole lot of options other than taxes for municipalities. But we'll leave no stone unturned this year in terms of thinking outside the box and ways to increase our revenue so that we can grow that side of the ledger, so to speak, as fast as the expenses are growing. And really, it's just something that everyone's going to have to start taking a look at because every town is the same. Every conversation I have with every manager, administrator, selectman, this is happening to everyone. And so we have to figure out how to make those curves match up better. And it's going to have to start with, unfortunately, being a little more responsible with our expenses, yes, but we have to do some more with the revenue side. So again, we're so early right now. I want to commend the school committee and Gordon and Pam. Gordon and Pam have met with Kim and I already. President Thompson and President O'Shea already set up a meeting between these groups to chat about this stuff. And I think it's important. And I echo what you say about having these conversations in January and not having these conversations in May when we don't really have any time to look for solutions. We don't know what we're going to get yet. Again, we have this conversation every time we have this January meeting. We have no numbers. We have projections and estimates. And yes, the early projections / estimates are going to have to come down in all likelihood from maybe where we desire them to be. But I think there's enough people in the room to come up with these ideas to make it all happen. That's how I feel. That's how I felt after our meeting the other night. I think there's enough to keep the outstanding staff that we have in place and figure out how to make these numbers match up. I'm confident that we can do it at the end of the day. Again, there's still a lot of unknowns, but I'm confident that we can get it done.
I would echo that too, that I think we're off on a good foot starting this process, but of course it is still very early. It's a lot of projections about what could be, but until all the level ones are submitted and until we get some more ideas from the state legislature about what their budget might look like, it's, we have an idea of what we need to, look at, but it's still early to get into the weeds a little bit. Does anyone have any questions or comments from either side, from the school committee or from?
So this is more associated with sort of the rise in students needing these services, not necessarily the cost of the services, or what's been more of
a combination of
yeah.
You actually, if you look at that chart on the second page, it was as I would mention, the vendor numbers represent schools out of district placements, and we only have right now probably 3 additional out of district placements from last year. So you do have rising costs, both with the tuitions, and you have significant cost escalation in contracted services.
I think that number, Gordon, for the out of district placements, people are probably curious. I think it was 34 last year and 37 right now, which can change.
There are students
at any
that
time.
are in evaluation now.
To 37 students.
Correct.
37
Yes.
this year, 34 last
Just
year.
in case you were curious on that.
One of the biggest areas where we're seeing cost increases is transportation. You can't not transport students. So
Yeah, they gotta get there. To be able to-
And
yeah.
as Pam, I think, mentioned, although transportation was added to the circuit breaker, they didn't necessarily increase the amount of money that was going to be allotted for a circuit breaker reimbursement. So by law, they have to reimburse academic tuition and academic support first, transportation second. All of the eligible costs that came in for academic support and out-of-district tuition were met with that 75% for costs or payments that were made above the $52,000 threshold. Transportation, unfortunately, then was whatever was left. That was reimbursed at 44%. And I think we lost close to
I was thinking it was close to 200,000.
200,000.
150.
So in our projections for the budget for this year, we thought we would have an additional 200,000 in the circuit breaker reimbursement. Legislature did hear from that. I don't know if that will change things, but they did hear.
Any questions from?
Just on an exciting note, as Tom alluded to, the high school is being currently framed. The steel is flying. We hope to have all steel up by March and have a topping off ceremony. Certainly we'll invite everyone. We'll have a lunch. They put a tree on top to signify the end of the steel going up. Also, so you know, the school committee named the natatorium. We've named it the Redstone Quarry Natatorium.
Neat.
So we'll have some kind of a quarry theme. There's some quarry hints in the architecture of the building itself, so it kind of all wraps right in. So that'll be pretty cool, and it'll be one of the nicest pools in the area. So pretty excited about that.
Great.
Thank you for having us.
Can I say one other thing that I think was important that I remembered? I heard Kim say that town, congratulations, the bond rating is much better than projected. And I thought I heard a number of like, the town is going to save like $22 million. Did I get that right, Kim?
Yes.
I think that's great. So congrats
Absolutely.
over the life of the loan. It's very significant. So
Good news for the town.
it's great news for
Yep.
your town.
Absolutely.
Good for the town.
Cool. Thanks so much for having us tonight. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Oh, we're gonna leave two.
Questions on the ADA grant? Like Erin's just sitting back there. She only has the one thing, and I didn't know if you would entertain. Just I told her that she didn't even have to be here, but she's obviously.
I don't have any, but I'm happy to move out of order if someone wishes to
I'm
make
sorry.
action.
Yeah.
You okay?
Yeah, I got my answers already.
Okay.
And I'm always the one with the question, so unless you want to move out of order, take that ADA grant now.
Sure.
It's a,
Just do.
so she didn't have to stay.
And I think John's gone.
Jane.
That's okay.
Yeah.
What I would do is make a motion now to again move out of order to 8B5, which is the acceptance of the municipal ADA improvement grant.
Okay.
There's a motion made and seconded to move out of order. Any further discussion? Saying none. Jim?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
John is absent and Kathy?
Yes.
We are to accepting the municipal ADA improvement grant. Yeah,
Bring her on up.
if you.
He's here.
Oh, I thought she was. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I'm happy to be again following the statement, saving 22 million. So I am here not only as the COA director, but also as the chair of the Commission on Disabilities, speaking for the commission with their permission in support of this grant to update the self-evaluation and transition plan that was originally done in 2015. The commission is really thrilled that the grant they submitted with the help of the town it was approved, and they look forward to getting to work with the Institute of Human Design to work
with town stakeholders on this opportunity to improve accessibility and equity for the citizens of East Long Meadow. And then if I can put my COA director hat on again for a minute. I support the acceptance of the grant because I think it just intersects so well with the age-friendly information that I submitted to you all last month, and it just emphasizes that work a little bit.
I'll only add that I think the Commission for People with Disabilities is really excited to move forward on this grant and the self-assessment in particular, because the last time the town did the self-assessment, there was no commission that could help shepherd and ensure that whatever plans were made to transition to more accessibility friendly changes. We actually have a commission now that could help oversee that and support the implementation of the plan. We also didn't have this form of government, the manager council form of government. So I think that we are in a much better position today to implement any changes that we create in the self-evaluation than we were previously.
Great.
Through the chair.
Sure, Ralph.
I was a little surprised. It seems like we just did that. I'm like, we just
Time flies.
did it like 2 years ago.
Mhm.
To find out it was almost 10 years ago now, just threw me for a loop. I remember walking around and seeing all the different buildings and what had to be done and all. So will this grant are we going to use that report that we did before basically as a basis for it and just update it? Or is it a brand new facilities and everything? Or is it a combination where they see it, which helps them along?
Well, sorry, go ahead. It's the same company, it's the same architect, same consultant that did the plan in 2015. So they will build on the work that they completed in 2015. And we were able to give them some of the updates that have been done since 2015. So they'll
Has been
on that.
That's good.
Yeah, and again, I think that the commission has a role to play here and will be able to work more proactively with different departments to do these assessments alongside of the firm. So I think that'll be really a quality report.
Thank you.
Thanks. If there's no further questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to accept municipal ADA improvement grant in the amount of $47,159 for Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded, and thirded. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Jim?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
And Kathy?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you for all of
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for
Thank you.
going out of order.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can still stay if you'd like.
Thank you. I might.
And I don't recall that we said in that motion to return to the public hearing. Would someone like to make a motion to return to our public hearing?
You have it?
Sorry. I'll make a motion to return to number 7, public hearings.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Jim?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Myself is a yes.
I have it.
Marilyn?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
And Kathy?
Over here, I got it. Yes.
Okay. Sorry for the delay. We are now at our public hearing for the proposed amendments
all over.
and
All right.
zoning bylaws relative to the amendments necessary for the town to conform to the new Affordable Homes Act. It's be used by right as a required first reading. The council members from left to right are Jim Iden, Anna Jones, myself, Connor O'Shea, Marilyn Richards, Ralph Page, John Torsha may be back, but he's absent at the moment, and Kathy Hill on Zoom. I would ask the applicant in this case, if there's a representative, to read the, actually, I'm doing this out of order. If Jeannie could read the legal notice into the record.
East Long Meadow Town Council will hold a public hearing on January 14 at 6:15 PM in the media room of the Council on Aging located at 328 North Main Street for a first reading of proposed amendments to the Town of East Long Meadow zoning bylaws relative to the amendments necessary for the town to conform to the new Affordable Homes Act, allowing accessory dwelling units, ADUs, by right. Amendments include the addition of section 450-5.11, accessory dwelling units, to the East Long Meadow zoning bylaw, and for the amendments of section 450-3.3, additional use, dimensional, and density regulations, section 450-9.3, projects requiring the site plan review, section 450-11.2, terms defined, table 3-1, schedule of use regulations, and table 3-2, table of dimensional regulations of the East Long Meadow zoning bylaw. The public hearing may also be attended via Zoom webinar. Information relating to this bylaw is available for public inspection at the town clerk's office, 60 Center Square. To view an electronic version of the proposed amendments, please visit the town's website. For the council, Gina Quaglietti, town clerk, clerk of the council.
Eugenie? Then at this time, I would ask our Director of Planning, Rob, if he could present the overall proposal and the reasons for it.
And when we're ready, I think John Torsa should read this in.
Hey, Rob.
Hello, happy New Year, everybody.
Hi.
Thank you. So you want me to give a brief background, or what would you like for me to?
Yeah, if you just want to give a brief background of how we got here and what contained inside the bylaw.
So it's been a long journey to get here. So we first heard about this law coming out August of this past year. It's taken us 6 months to come up with regulations that are pretty much fine-tuned at this point. The planning board did their public hearing last week on this and have their recommendations highlighted in the document that's before you. Been pretty comprehensive effort. We've had input from every department. We've had input from stakeholders, town management, and we have crafted a bylaw that I think is pretty airtight. There's definitely some modifications that could be made to it, but I am excited to see what the council is going to discuss during this public hearing. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rob. At this time, is there someone that would like to
I'm not volunteering.
propose changes? We can split it out. Okay. Thank you, Rob.
Is he just reading what's in blue or yellow or?
I think in this instance.
It'll be a surprise.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely have to read the whole new 450-5.11, but then the other stuff, I think we just have to read is whether it's blue or red. That was additions or subtractions.
Yes, all additions, subtractions, highlights.
You should also note that the planning board recommendations are highlighted too.
Yeah.
Yes.
We want to acknowledge that those sections are planning board recommendations as well as additions. That makes sense.
Thank you.
So I will start with the letter that we've received from the Director of Planning. It states at the January 7th, 2025 meeting of the East Long Meadow Planning Board, the board reviewed proposed amendments to the Town of East Long Meadow zoning bylaw for the addition of subsection 450-5.11, which is accessory dwelling units or ADUs, and for amendments of subsection 450-3.3, additional use, dimensional and density regulations, subsection 450-9.3, projects requiring site plan review, subsection 450-11.2, terms defined, table 3.1, which is the schedule of use regulations, and table 3.2, the table of dimensional regulations. The board voted unanimously and the recommendations to the town council and encourage that they review and adopt the amendments as presented. The text in blue indicates language to be included, while text in red, while red text indicates language to be deleted. Language that is highlighted with are additional recommendations included by the planning board. The advertised public hearing and the board's discussion on this vote are duly noted in the minutes and recordings of their December 4th, 2024 and January 7th, 2025 meetings, Respectfully submitted, Robert Wachilla. So we will start under subsection 450-3.3, additional use, dimensional and density regulations, subsection B1C. We have the addition of language. B1C will now read, an accessory building shall not be used for residence purposes. And this is the addition, unless it adheres to the special use regulations set forth in subsection 450-5.11, accessory dwelling units. And then under subsection 450-3.3, additional use, dimensional and density regulations, subsection B3, the first line will now read lot coverage. No, and we're going to remove the word principal building shall be erected, and the rest of it remains the same. So we're removing the word principal. Under 453.3 B4 setback, we are adding language under 4A accessory. We are adding building or. So it'll now read accessory building or structure. Setback shall be the setback of the district of the primary building, and the setback, side yard, and rear yard requirements must be met for the district in which the accessory structure is constructed. Any accessory structure, and we're adding not including accessory dwelling units, which shall be constructed within the side yard and or rear yard in the district. And it continues on with language currently. Oh. I remember this. Under Article 5, special use regulations. We are adding the next 4 pages. So subsection 450-5.11, accessory dwelling units, ADUs. A, purpose. Because that's not in there, it will read, this bylaw addresses the necessary permitting path and design requirements for accessory dwelling units known as ADUs in order to site these buildings in an appropriate manner for the community. B, terms defined. Accessory dwelling unit, ADU. An accessory building or addition containing a housing unit inclusive of sleeping, cooking, and sanitary facilities on the same lot as a single-family dwelling. An ADU maintains a separate entrance, either directly from the outside or through an entry hall or corridor shared with the principal dwelling, sufficient to meet the requirements of the state building code for safe egress. An ADU is not larger in gross floor area than 1/2 the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. ADUs are incidental and subordinate to the primary building. Accessory dwelling unit cannot exist without a single-family dwelling on a lot. Attached accessory dwelling unit. An accessory dwelling unit, ADU, which is in addition to an existing single-family dwelling and has its own separate entrance. Attached ADUs may also have internal entryways which connect the single-family dwelling to the ADU. Contained accessory dwelling unit. An accessory dwelling unit which is contained entirely within an existing or new single-family dwelling and requires no significant external changes to the dwelling or site beyond entrances and windows required by the building code. Detached accessory dwelling unit. An accessory dwelling unit that is a freestanding and detached building which is incidental and subordinate to the primary dwelling. Detached ADUs may either be the product of new construction or an existing accessory building or structure which is converted into an ADU. C, applicability. C1, accessory dwelling units, ADUs, are allowed by right in the residence AA, A, B, and C zoning districts After site plan review, approval is granted by the planning board. ADUs are not eligible for site plan review waiver. 2, ADUs shall not be larger in gross floor area than 1/2 the gross floor area of the primary dwelling or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. 3, ADU shall only be placed on a residential lots which have a single family dwelling on them. 4, no more than one ADU shall be placed on a lot. 5, a mobile home or any other temporary structure are prohibited from being used or classified as ADUs. D, general requirements. D1, accessory dwelling units, ADUs, shall meet the requirements of the following regulations under Massachusetts state law. 1A, Massachusetts State Building Code 780 CMR as amended. B, State Sanitary Code 105 CMR 410 as amended. C, Title 5 of the State Environmental Code 310 CMR 15.000 as amended. D, any other relevant local, state, and federal regulations. D2, ADU shall have the appropriate facilities, including but not limited to kitchens, bathrooms with a sink, toilet, and shower, potable water source, plumbing connections, hot water, functional heating system, proper ventilation, working electricity, and operable windows. 3, accessory dwelling units, ADUs, shall not be sold or transferred separate and apart from the primary dwelling. Primary dwelling and the ADU shall remain in common or single ownership. 4, attached and contained ADUs shall maintain a separate entrance directly to the outside. 5, stairways needed to access second-story ADUs should be enclosed within the exterior walls of the dwelling. Otherwise, they must not be apparent from the street. 6, ADUs shall be suitable for human habitation all year round and meet the minimum standards of the State Sanitary Code 105 CMR 410 as amended. 7, occupancy of an ADU shall be limited to what is allowable under the Massachusetts State Building Code 780 CMR as amended and the State Sanitary Code 105 CMR 410 as amended. Number 8, ADUs shall have their own individual metered electrical connection in accordance with 105 CMR 410.354 as amended. Number 9, ADUs shall not be used as a short-term rental. Number 10, 1 off-street parking spot shall be provided for an ADU. Number 11, the ADU shall have a separate address from the primary dwelling for the purposes of receiving mail and deliveries. An ADU may have the same street number as the primary dwelling and be followed by an alphanumeric character, example 121A, 121B. Both dwelling units shall be easily distinguishable and properly numbered from the street in order for emergency services to identify each building. 12, an ADU shall have separate trash and recycling receptacles from the primary dwelling and must comply with the Board of Health requirements. So should I switch the numbering because number 13's been removed? So number 14 would actually be number 13. So again, number 13, in order to encourage the development of accessory dwelling units, ADUs, for disabled and handicapped individuals and persons with limited mobility, the permit granting authority, may allow reasonable deviation from the dimensional requirements of the zoning bylaw where necessary to install features that facilitate access and mobility for disabled persons. The next one will be numbered 14. It is detached accessory dwelling units, ADUs. 14A, detached ADU may either be the result of new construction or the rehabilitation slash conversion of an existing accessory dwelling building or structure. The rehabilitated slash converted building or structure shall abide by the provisions of this section, subsection 450-5.11, in order to be considered an accessory dwelling unit, ADU. 14B, detached ADUs shall have separate water and sewer connections from the primary dwelling and shall adhere to the DPW water and sewer regulations. 14C, detached ADUs shall meet all primary building setback requirements for the district in which it is located. See Table 3-2, dimensional regulations. D, detached ADUs that may require a separate curb cut and driveway shall adhere to the DPW curb cut regulations and gain the necessary approvals. E, detached ADUs shall adhere to the height requirement for the district in which it is located. F, there shall be no occupancy of a detached ADU until the building commissioner has issued a certificate of occupancy. 14. E. No, sorry, I gotta go back. Yes. It's number E.
Letter.
Okay, review process. Number one, the applicant for an accessory dwelling unit, ADU, shall furnish a site plan that conforms to the requirements under subsection 450-9.4, contents of a site plan. Contents of site plan. Number two, the provisions of subsection 450-9.5, review procedure, subsection 450-9.6, administration, subsection 450-9.7, standards for review, and subsection 450-9.8, sewer and water capacity, shall apply to the permitting of ADUs. Number three, upon granting of the site plan review approval by the planning board, the applicant shall list their accessory dwelling unit, ADU, on the ADU registry maintained by the planning department. Failure to do so would delay issuance of a certificate of occupancy. F, enforcement. 1, the building commissioner or their designee shall administer and enforce the provisions. This bylaw is detailed in subsection 450-7.1, enforcement. Number 2, no building shall be constructed or changed in use or configuration until the building commissioner has issued appropriate building permits. Number 3, relative permits shall be obtained from the Department of Public Works and Board of Health before the accessory dwelling unit, ADU, may be inhabited. Okay, under Article 9, site plan review, subsection 450-9.3, projects requiring site plan review. Under A, we are adding the number 8, accessory dwelling units, ADUs. Under Article 11, definitions, subsection 450-11.2, terms defined. Under accessory building or structure, it now reads, a building or structure detached from a primary building on the same lot and customarily incidental and subordinate to the primary building or use. An accessory building or structure cannot exist without a primary building on a lot. An accessory building shall not be used for residence purposes unless it adheres to the special use regulations set, I believe that's supposed to be set forth.
Yes.
In subsection 450-5.11, accessory dwelling units. Accessory dwelling unit, ADU. An accessory building or addition containing a housing unit inclusive of sleeping, cooking, and sanitary facilities on the same lot as a single-family dwelling. An ADU maintains a separate entrance either directly from the outside or through an entry hall or corridor shared with the principal dwelling, sufficient to meet the requirements of the state building code for safe egress. An ADU is not larger in gross floor area than 1/2 the gross floor area of the principal dwelling or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. ADUs are incidental and subordinate to the primary building. An accessory dwelling unit cannot exist without a single-family dwelling on a lot. Next definition, gross floor area. Some of the habitable areas of all floors of the building, including finished basements, mezzanine and intermediate floored tiers and penthouses of headroom height, measured from the exterior faces of exterior walls or from the center line of walls separating buildings, but excluding covered walkways, open roof over areas, cellars, unfinished basements, porches, and similar spaces, and pipe trenches, exterior terraces or steps, chimneys, roof, overhangs.
Yeah, should be overhangs.
And similar features. Then we skip down to the definition for primary dwelling. The main or most important dwelling on a lot. And then we'll skip down to the addition of short-term rental, an occupied property that is not a hotel, motel, lodging, or bed and breakfast establishment where at least one room or unit is rented out by an operator through the use of advanced reservations. A short-term rental includes an apartment, house, cottage, and condominium. It does not include property that is rented out through tenancies, at will, or month-to-month leases. It also does not include timeshare properties or bed and breakfast homes. Under 450 attachment 1, which is table 3.1. Adding number 12, accessory dwelling unit ADU. It says C subsection 450-5.11. And this will be allowed in residence AA, residence A, residence B, residence C. It will not be allowed in elderly residential, commercial, business, industrial garden park, golf recreation, planned unit residential, planned adult residential, or mixed-use village. Come on, that was impressive. I remembered all of that.
I would hope.
Then under notes, number 2, we are changing it. It will now read an accessory structure excluding ADUs constructed at least 10 feet behind the principal building can be erected no closer than 5 feet to the rear and or side property line. Any other accessory structures must meet the required side and rear yard setbacks for the principal building. 4 and 5 are being removed, and those are also those little footnotes up and top get removed. So with that, I believe that's the reading of this.
I believe that's everything.
The
first reading.
Through the chair, may I?
Again.
So Rob, under 511 D5, the stairways, I went back and I reviewed the footage from the planning board, and they had suggested that that be highlighted and removed. And I just think we missed that.
Yeah, we must have missed that during the review. Thank you for pointing that out.
So the recommendation from the planning board would be, we have it on page 4, would be number D5. They recommended, and I believe so did the attorney that looked at it, that D5 be removed.
Well, they didn't advocate to have it removed entirely. They just recommended being cautious with it because they potentially saw it as a unreasonable regulation.
So that was our attorney.
Mm-hmm.
but if you go back and look at the planning board.
Oh, yes.
I double checked just to make sure, because I couldn't remember because I had adjusted. But again, I think that's just something, we read it in.
Yep.
That the planning matter subcommittee, when this is sent to them, takes a look at. Yeah.
I got it. Thank you.
Okay. That said, this is a public hearing, so if there is anyone in the public that wishes to make a comment or speak, you may come forward and state your name and address for the record and for your comment. For anyone in the public? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public input portion of this meeting.
Just bring it back to the board.
Yes.
Because we're gonna, right.
Yep. And so then at this time, if there's any counselors that wish to make questions or comments or concerns, Marilyn?
Rob, I have a question on review process number 3, where it suggests that the planning board is going to maintain an ADU registry. I think that's great, first of all. In fact, I think the whole document is done very well.
Thank you.
The registry piece, I imagine, would keep a tally of how many of these smaller units we have. Okay.
So to answer your question,
I'm going after the regional fair share I asked the legislators this and they didn't have an answer, and I don't expect you to have one either. But I think that we're required to have 10% of our housing stock as affordable. And this is being done to provide affordable opportunities. So my question would, wouldn't it be?
Yeah. Yes and no. I think it does both those things. It allows people to provide more affordable housing at the state level, but also allows for more housing to be created in general. So the biggest issue is just housing supply, but
how does it impact our 10% requirement?
So,
I mean, it should in some fashion. We should get credit for it is what I'm leading up to. And I don't expect you to have the answer. I'm asking that in your travels, if you're talking to other communities, or we can chase after this to see how we can add this to our 10%, which is probably now 6%, something like
Depends how much they charge for rent.
True. Well, so then we're defeating the purpose of why we're doing this.
Well, we're doing it.
Well, because we got to
protect ourselves from what sort of was imposed on us.
I hear that.
And to go back to my comment from before, perhaps increase revenue.
but also I do want to point out that what you're bringing up is the 10% threshold for the community in terms of affordable housing, which is 80% of area median income, which is listed under the state subsidized housing index. And usually what that means is if you reach your 10%, you're technically considered a safe harbor community, which means that you aren't forcefully required to approve a 40B project.
Right.
That's when you have the authority to deny one if you felt that's not appropriate to be in the community. We are not that 10%, I believe.
No.
I also haven't, so 40Bs also aren't as common anymore as they used to be, at least in this part of the state. Maybe unless you're like in a Springfield or a Holyoke, more common out east. Usually developers who do them try to force their way in, which isn't the most appropriate way to do it.
Right.
But yeah, that's what you're referring to. In this situation, the legislator for the ADU wanted to make housing easier and more possible. So it's more about not the affordability piece per se, it's more about the quantity. So how can we find ways to build more housing just overall?
Right.
And to go back to the registry, we're also required by the state to report, I don't know if it's an annual basis or quarterly basis.
Annual.
The number of approved permits we have for ADUs. And that's kind of the two-tier factor of the registry. It's going to be an OpenGov registration. We're not going to charge a fee for it. You just go on there, fill out your information. This will help us determine if it's being rented out, who's going to live there, and it'll help us with our metrics so we can report to the state the appropriate number of ADUs. Yeah.
Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
Other questions?
Through the chair, not a question. I just want to say, excellent job on the bylaw. obviously, I've read through it multiple times. For having such a short time frame to put it together, fantastic job.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just glad we're finally got to this point.
Close.
And also,
I
I do want to ask one question of the council. So do you all accept the recommendations by the planning board in this document? And if so, I would like to make a cleaner version of this that incorporates those versions without the highlights. So it's one fluent document.
Sorry. You didn't read the highlighted parts, right? Are you?
So I read the highlighted parts that
we were included
into the document.
There was one highlighted part that was Xed out. And I understand, but I still want to speak to it. It says that accessory dwelling units shall be designed so that appearance and scale of the ADU is compatible with the primary dwelling. And, that's always been something that we have focused on with any of our residential bylaws, that there is, it reflects the area where it's being constructed. You're not going to have a 50-foot structure with ranch houses, that kind of thing. And I understand that was overly restrictive, and that's why it was taken out.
And I believe the planning board brought that up too during their public hearing last week. And that's why it was decided to recommend the removal of that section, or of that section 13.
Well, I had a conversation with a very wise person, and he told me that he has seen these units being built in other communities, and the builders are doing an amazing job. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how much is it costing to create these units for communities? And that it really does not detract from the original structure, which is what my goal would be. So I guess we have to hope that the builders do a good job.
So if I may, and I don't want to interject too much into this is really your call. I perhaps if the planning board recommended a version of that, that's what, regardless of if you agree with their recommendations or not, you should get the version that they recommended, and you can go back and delete or add what they did or didn't do. But I think the one that they recommended should be the one that comes to the council.
Well, also it has their edits in there.
Yeah, no, I know it does. But if you're going to clean it up as recommended by the planning board. Right?
Yeah.
Through the chair, which is what we actually read into the record.
Right.
Which was our first reading. So,
So would it be appropriate for me to clean it up?
Yes.
And just note that this includes recommendations by the planning board?
Yes.
Okay, I can do that.
I do have some comments myself if no one else has any others. First, thank you for putting it together, and of course to the planning board and everyone else that was involved. It's definitely a lot of work in a short amount of time to put all of this, these changes together. I think the only thing that I strongly disagree with, though, under D4A and D4C is really changing the requirement that a detached ADU should have to follow the primary building's setback requirements. I think that's highly restrictive and basically negates the point of the state legislature adding ADUs as a requirement for all communities in Massachusetts. I even just took the lot that my parents' house is on, which is almost an acre. And if that was to be a requirement, if an ADU max could be 900 square feet, it would be impossible to build a 900 square foot ADU, even though there's plenty of space from a visual perspective on the whole side of the yard.
Even an attachment?
If it was attached, you probably could do it, but if it was detached, it would not be possible.
So just to follow up to that, the state is in the process of doing CMRs, which is suggested regulations for it. And that is one that they've included in that suggested regulation. Again, they just closed a question comment period on it. So the regulations aren't finalized yet, but it looks like down that path. So.
But is that a suggestion or is that you can't?
It's 760 CMR, which is state regulations
but the regulations are very vague and they're not going to be done by that February 2nd deadline. They have to read through thousands of comments submitted to them. And they only have one attorney working on this, so I don't think they're going to do it in time.
It's gonna take them a while just to get through mine.
It took them 6 months to do the draft regulations. So I mean, it's probably gonna be another 6 months to a year.
6 months to a year before the final comes in.
And worst case scenario, we just do another amendment to this section if we really need to.
I
And
just think about it from the perspective too, that if our current bylaws say that you can build pretty much any other accessory structure, especially in zone A, 5 feet from the property line and be 35 feet tall, why should an ADU that's going to be probably smaller than that be any different?
Because it's a dwelling unit.
Which is probably quieter than a mechanic in a garage.
Yeah.
Well, there
Which
shouldn't
is
be a
probably not
mechanic in
right in
the
a
garage.
residential zone anyway.
Personal, not for profit, but.
Gotcha.
So, but that was one thought. I'm also curious, and I don't know if you have any insight from the planning board perspective as to why they are prohibiting a site plan review waiver, considering that all other residential development doesn't require a site plan review in our bylaws. So why would
just for single family homes, and that's just what the board wanted. They wanted more oversight with these ADUs. And it hasn't been very clear to us about whether or not we can even require site plan review, because the majority of communities in Massachusetts don't require site plan review for single family homes. And they're telling us not to be more restrictive than what we already do for single family homes. So that's the one area that's kind of the biggest question mark. And the lawyers have not, our town council, our town attorneys did not present that as an issue to me when they reviewed this document before it went to the planning board. So that's why it's being kept as such. But there was discussion about whether or not to require attached ADUs to go through site plan review, which I'm more than open to discuss that with the council if that's what you want to do. But I do encourage that for detached ADUs, that at least keeping the site plan review requirement there would ensure that they comply with the provisions of this section.
And in response to that, currently we have attached ADUs already in place.
Well, they're attached additions.
You know what I mean?
A bedroom with a bathroom.
So there are additions to homes that have met building code.
Yep.
And as long as there's free access within the structure, it has a separate entrance, a driveway. It looks like a single family home, but it does have an accessory unit. And that's just with the building inspector.
There's also a provision in our special permit section for non-conforming structures that allows for you to create an ADU in a building that's within, say, that 5-foot area property. If the board feels that's not going to be more detrimental to the area, then they can grant that to you. So there's a pathway for people to go if something doesn't fully fit within the confines and it's an existing building. So we're not trying to prohibit everybody's ability from doing this.
So the other thought was sort of the only other places where you can have multi-family residences do require site plan, which is planned residential, which have their own zone, which requires a site plan. So we've basically been forced to have multi-family allowed in zoning. And so that was just and the state, I believe, suggested or said that the towns could do that. So they had that whole list of things we couldn't do. And site plan was one of those things that they suggested to do.
Yeah.
And so I think we just kind of left it in there for another level of oversight.
Yep. And mind you, site plan review cannot deny the ability for somebody to build one of these. It just requires further review from the planning board. And that's pretty much it. The site plans that people can draw up for this don't have to be thousands of dollars. They could be a simple sketch that you would submit for a building permit. It just depends on the complexity of the project.
I just wanted to make sure we're not making it overly burdensome or expensive, thereby again negating the.
And we also allow for waivers too for site plan review. So if there's aspects that are not relevant, the applicant could request a waiver for those things.
But in this case, the bylaw as presented says waivers aren't permitted.
Well, for the site plan review requirement. So we have a waiver from the whole site plan review process.
You can waive the landscape plan, the lighting plan and all that.
The traffic study, stuff like that.
Yeah.
The more expensive things, you can waive those altogether.
Then I think the only other thing that I was thinking of, there's a couple other things that potentially could be cleaned up, but we have to tackle it at the moment. But just, I think it's some consistency stuff, like we say, accessory dwelling units, ADUs in parentheses in a number of places, but then other places we're just saying ADUs. I think it should be one or the other since we already defined the term. And then I have another consistency thing. I'm not sure what our practice has been with some other zoning bylaws lately, but we have terms defined as a section in the bylaw itself, but then we also have all of the same definitions under 450-11 for where all of the terms for our zoning bylaws are. And I understand having them in some instances in the bylaw itself, if that definition was going to be different than the general accepted definition, but in this case, they're not. So I don't know why we would put them in both.
Sounds like a job for your bylaw review committee.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, some of them are different, such as gross floor area. The definition that's read within the bylaw is completely different than Article 11. And again, I believe our bylaw says that a definition within that portion of the bylaw is only for that portion of the bylaw.
But also, to go back to gross floor area, that's put at the end in section 11 on purpose, so it could be used throughout the whole bylaw. I think what he's referring to is in 450-5.11, where you have accessory dwelling unit, but those other three terms underneath actually aren't in section 11. So the only one that is in section 11 is accessory dwelling unit. So the reason why I put those other definitions here is so people can easily reference them when they're going through the section of the bylaw. They're not used anywhere else in the bylaw. The only term that is used throughout the whole bylaw, the whole zoning bylaw, is accessory dwelling unit. So that was the justification for organizing it that way. But I could definitely look at the consistency of using term accessory dwelling unit with the parentheses and just clean that up and then bring that back to the council.
Okay.
And then the only other thing was also in some places we've put like a reference to other bylaws, and it would say like 450 dash whatever, and in parentheses we'd put the name of it. I don't know if we do that in all of the other ones, because if we ever change the name, which we've changed the name of bylaws before, we would then have misleading references all over the place instead of just telling them to go to the section number.
He's talking about C, and we've always felt that that's better than writing it all out. You know, because it's important when you're dealing with that particular area that you know the whole thing, you know exactly what is based on that statement. So that's why it says C section 450 dash whatever. That doesn't necessarily have to have the title.
Oh yeah, I still like having the reference.
Right,
you
right.
still know to go find additional requirements, but yeah, having the title of it.
I hear you. Yeah.
Might just lead to
more revisions
later on.
So I'm just a little bit, I'm trying to understand. So
If you look under review process, number 2, it says provisions of subsection 450-9.5.
Oh, I see. Okay.
What he's saying is remove the review procedure.
Yep.
And the next one, you know, you just put a comma 459.6 and you just remove administration.
For the next time you recodify.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, I could just
10 years.
So I guess it makes sense to take out the parentheses with the title and just leave the numbers. Okay.
Yeah, that's essentially what I was trying to say.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can definitely do that.
That was the end of my thoughts. Does anyone have any other?
Yeah,
sure.
I met with the planning board. They were very gracious to hear some of my thoughts and concerns. And one of the largest ones that I had that they chose not to accept and go with is what you've brought up, which is site plan review. I had no problems with detached dwellings, seeing where they were going to be located on the site and all. I just thought an attached ADU was a little much to ask for based on the fact that they need a building permit anyways. Under the building permit, they have to make sure all the setbacks and all are done. And I just thought the cost of the site plan, the time to, go to the planning board, set up the meeting, which you could be looking a couple months, was just a little bit overburdensome. for something that they had no control over. They can't say no if it meets all the requirements. That was just one of my thoughts when we were looking at it, that I know this goes to the subcommittee, and I think that's just something to keep in the back of our minds. And again, I know the planning board wanted some control over it. Like Russ said, even though some of them they may have to allow, he wants to be able to say, hey, I don't think that's very fair. It doesn't look quite right, even though we have to allow it.
Thank you, Ralph.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we can now take a motion to continue the public hearing. I think we will meet tentatively next week at the Planning Matters Subcommittee to review this as well as the solar one, so we could continue this to our January 28th meeting unless people felt it appropriate to give more time to February 11th, but I'll
Is
leave
there
that
a
up.
date? Is there a date for that meeting next week?
Uh,
Well, we had talked about it. We were
Yeah.
hoping to send it out, but
Wednesday or Thursday.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. I just didn't have it. I
Yeah,
just didn't have
no,
it.
that hasn't been totally formalized yet.
Okay, gotcha.
So through the chair, can we look to continue it to the January 28th? And at that time, if the subcommittee hasn't come up with the recommendations, we could always continue it to the
Sure.
following meeting if needed. But I do know the state law goes into effect February 2nd regarding this. And the hope was to try and get some type of bylaw in before the law becomes effective.
I think we're doing pretty well with that timeline, since that's a second reading date, so. I also do have a question, for the council, through the chair.
Sure.
So did you want me to do the suggested, cleaning up edits before that Planning Matter Subcommittee meeting, or is that not necessary?
I would say if you could just clean it up to what the planning board had recommended to the council so that there isn't all the highlighting and additional strike through.
Yep.
And then from there, any of the things that we suggested today, we can add on top of it from the council review.
And I can note that too, as additions from the first review, just so we can keep track of that, but, okay.
Sure.
Do that. Yep.
Okay.
So if we're ready for the motion.
I think we are.
I make a motion to continue the public hearing for the proposed amendments to the town of East Long Meadow zoning bylaws relative to the amendments necessary for the town to conform to the new Affordable Homes Act, allowing accessory dwelling units to January 28th and 6:15 PM at 6:15.
You already have a continuation for the solar bylaw amendments. Continue.
So then we'll do
Eight at
6:30. We'll do 6:30.
6:30 sounds wonderful.
It's gonna be a busy night.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion for continuing? Okay, seeing none. Jim?
Yes.
Anna?
yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Kathy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Through there.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
I would make a motion that we forward this proposed ADU bylaw to the Planning Matters Subcommittee for their recommendations.
Second.
Been made and seconded. Any further discussion? None. Jim?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
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 Ralph?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Kathy?
Yes.
Okay, great. We'll put that next up.
Right.
Okay, so now we are down to 8.2 quarterly financial report. See if the lengthy attachment.
Halfway point.
Does anyone have any questions or comments or concerns on the information?
I would prefer it in smaller print, so it fits on 42 pages.
Munis could probably go smaller.
No, we need how thick are the glass?
I think the only thing from my perspective, and it's not so much on the numbers themselves, I do like seeing all of that level of detail, but I think it may be helpful from a council perspective if we just had like a one sheet either from you, Tom, or from the finance director that just summarizes anything that looks glaringly maybe out of the normal, or that yes, we are on target, because some of the stuff it's hard to remember that, oh yeah, we expect that that's halfway spent, or no, that one's 100%, or
and that it's always the encumbrance, and you know, bills get paid at the beginning of the year and they're at 100% in the first quarter. So we can do that. I mean, if that would make it easier in terms of breaking it down, as long, you know, so that way we don't have to go through every sheet and say, this one's at 48%, looks good. This one's at 99 because we spent all the money at the beginning of the year, or it's all encumbered, which the school, like for instance, the school does a lot of. Their budget's at 99%, whatever right now, because they encumber everything. So, but we can certainly do that. There was nothing sort of out of line that jumped out at me or unexpected. But yeah, we can do like a summary sheet kind of. Okay.
Anyone else?
So, through the chair, I guess my question would be for our finance director, and if in the 84 pages you saw anything that concerns you at all with regards to, well, like in the past, we've had our legal account, which we've had concerns with. Maybe we got to switch it from this or that. And I just wasn't sure if anything is throwing up any red flags that we have to be concerned about. I did see like the snow budget. Looks like we're already over. Which we expect. But again, that's one of those where I just want to make sure that as we go along, if it's going to be quite a bit of money, that we know ahead of time and can start planning for it. And I didn't see anything that really jumped out based on the last few years in comparison. But I thought it would be a fair question. You came all the way here this evening. The least I could do is ask.
I mean, being halfway through the year, it's not like I don't see anything flaring at me. In the next couple months, we'll start to look at it a little bit closer just to make sure things aren't out of line. But everything.
One other question. Sorry, through the chair. Jeannie, I know as far as your budget, were we able to think ahead? I know E-code was expensive last year. And I mean, as far as the town clerk's budget, does it look like? I mean, obviously, we talked today about if we do this charter amendment.
So you're talking about FY26. Planning for FY26.
Well, yes, we're in 26 now, right? 25.
No.
Well, we're in 25.
Right.
And so your budget for 25. Obviously, if we have to send out postcards and all, are we going to be short? Do you think?
Be short for that if we do the charter amendment, because by law, we have to notify every household of any charter amendment, and the postage and the printing will be. And that was unexpected, unanticipated.
And that's what I'm thinking is any unanticipated things that we know they always come up, but thank God we have a little bit of free cash left.
Well, then we still have, but the reserve fund is there and sort of reasonably untouched so far this year. Thanks to our legal account being in line. But yeah, we'll if that's the will of the council, we'll make it happen. Right?
Okay, no.
But otherwise,
but I feel good now.
But yeah, otherwise, thank you for providing the information. Okay. We're done with quarterly financial report. Next, we have under financial matters, accepting the SFY 25 law enforcement body worn camera program grant. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to accept the FY 25 law enforcement body worn camera program grant in the amount of $129,009.78 per Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Tom?
So I was chatting with Mark the other day about this. obviously great news. This has obviously been something that the police department's been looking into for a while, and to have a grant pay for it all. The slight wrinkle is, and I'll let you decide what you think, will be the quote that we got that we're going to spend this money on is Motorola. And with their package comes a 5-year sort of service agreement for upgrading the cameras after 2 or 3 years, and then the video storage. Now, over 3 years, I'm supposed to have your permission to do that. So it's not really a 5-year contract, because this is all the money we're expending and we're not expending anything else. So we're not like locked into anything. But I think technically, Mark and I kind of decided that this is really a 5-year agreement. Whether we have to pay for any of those years after the initial really is immaterial. I still kind of need your permission to sign that 5-year thing, even though we're making the one-time payment and it's good for 5 years. That's my interpretation of the spirit of that 3 to 5 year thing.
I'm open to doing that if there's no other.
And so under the motion, do we have to know the details of the contract? In other words, who the 5-year contract is?
So
for, and
this was where our conversation eventually ended up, was we have a meeting on the 28th. So hopefully we can have that contract from Motorola and the specifics of it. And then maybe you make that motion then.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring it up so I didn't spring it on you in 2 weeks when we've already accepted the grant.
Gotcha.
But the acceptance of the grant is going to mean we'll have to make that motion to accept the 5-year agreement. So whether you do it now or in 2 Tuesdays, it still I wanted to bring it to your attention.
Yeah. I think that's appropriate.
Through the chair?
Sure.
Now, is that like a full implementation? Is that just like the equipment, or is that the equipment plus the storage? What's the?
Yes. Equipment plus storage. Yep.
That's for
5 years.
Money on the whole. It's like how they really make their money on the
right.
Yep. And it's the storage aspects of it.
Yep.
Other than that, I've seen firsthand how much this can protect officers and how much it can potentially save the town. So this is phenomenal.
Phenomenal. Yeah. Yep. I agree.
just out of curiosity through the chair, will our insurance give us better rates because we have it?
Don't you think I'm going to bring it up?
Okay, there's no other questions. A motion was made and seconded. So Jim?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Kathy?
Yes.
Accepted. Thank you.
You?
And next we have accepting the Mass DEP Sustainable Materials Recovery Program, SMRP grant.
Sure.
I make a motion to accept the Mass DEP Sustainable Materials Recovery Grant in the amount of $17,600 per Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. Jim?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
Yes. I'm a yes. And Kath?
Yes.
Great. More good news. Then next we have the acceptance of donations in the amount of $1,050 for Leahy Field. This one.
B6. I'll make a motion to accept donations in the amount of $1,050 from the Leahy family for Leahy Field per Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Jim?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
John?
I'm a yes.
And Kathy?
Yes.
Great. Thank you to those who made donations.
Thank you.
Next we have amending the vote from our December 10th, 2024 meeting for the ARPA funds for the TIP projects. Tim, were the number or the account numbers correct in the new?
Originally, the account numbers were correct, but I think the second one had the wrong title. So this is just correcting it so that the titles reflect the account numbers.
And so I could eat crow since I said we weren't going to bring up ARPA ever again.
Okay, is there a motion?
Make them, you guys.
No, you go. Forget it, I'm done.
Really
Make a motion to amend the vote. 2024 from. Oh, there you go.
That's all right.
Sort of make them right.
Yeah.
I make a motion to reappropriate $105,217.99 in remaining American Rescue Plan ARPA funds from account number 585514, Transportation Improvement Program, to the following projects. Line item 585517, DPW truck number 73 flatbed, the amount of $53,244.20. Line item 585517, municipal light plant, $9,712. Line item 3420016, patrol vehicle replacement, $34,052.95. Line item 3422007, DPW North Main Street tip, Harkness/Dearborn, the amount of $8,208.84. Total of $105,217.99. Reappropriate free cash and interest from these projects to account number 585514.
It keeps going.
2, I make a motion to reappropriate $5,217.99 in remaining American Rescue Plan ARPA funds from 585514 Transportation Improvement Program TIP to the following projects. 585517 DPW number 73 flatbed in the amount of $53,244.20. Line item 585517, DPW truck number 73 flatbed in the amount of $9,712. Line item 3420016, municipal light plant, $34,052.95. Line item 3422007, patrol vehicle replacement, the amount of $8,208.84 for a total of $5,217.89. And 99 cents. Reappropriate free cash and interest from these projects to account number 5855.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. And as Kim said, the numbers didn't change dollar amounts wise. It was just the correction of the description or the accounts next to it. Thought it was appropriate for us to re-vote on that, just so there wasn't any confusion about that on the record. Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, Jim.
Yes.
Anna.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn.
Yes.
Ralph.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
And Kathy.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you. Now should I say it?
now we're done.
I'm like, I shouldn't have said it. I shouldn't have said it.
Next under orders for the day, we have approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the December 10th minutes?
I make a motion to approve the December 10th,
Not to be
2024
done.
open session minutes. Thank you.
Motions.
As amended, since you just amended it.
Great point.
I didn't even hear it.
Yeah, that we could approve them as amended since we just amended the motion that we took at our December 10th.
So that's what we started with. It was, I make a motion to amend the vote from December 10th.
Right, I think
So
it's,
that
but
was-
it's, since we're gonna accept the minutes.
Are the minutes right?
The minutes are right.
The minutes are correct for.
Right.
So I suppose we're amending it today, so we don't need.
And in tonight's minutes, the amended vote will be into
Yeah.
That's
You don't have to.
any ARPA.
Oh, wait a minute, so later when I'm looking for that vote, I have to.
See other meetings.
Send you the amended certified motion tomorrow.
I think that makes sense. So we'll just accept the minutes as
is.
they were. 'Cause
Yeah.
That was what happened.
Right.
Oh, I see what you.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Just kidding. Yes.
Yes, Marilyn.
Yes.
Just a puppet time.
Yep.
I need to abstain.
John.
Yes.
And Kathy.
Yes.
Motions are approved.
Long night.
Okay, old business. We have number 1, discussion of the proposed bylaw, chapter 414 regarding unmanned aircraft system drones. So after one of our previous meetings where we had a proposal before us to add a bylaw regarding drones and aircraft systems. And the council at that time opted not to take any action on proceeding with it. But there was an action item that Rob followed up on to ask the police chief a few questions that both we had at that time. And so I'll just read for everyone's awareness what the police chief, Mark Williams, responded. On December 9th, hi Rob, I am not aware off the top of my head about a significant amount of complaints about this, if any at all. Is this a foreseeable issue in the future as drones become more widespread, both recreationally and in commercialization? Yes, I suppose so. It hasn't risen to the top of my priority list for new bylaws, that's for sure. But I guess one or two overly exuberant drone operators could quickly cause an issue. As Lieutenant Manning just reminded me, Christmas is coming, so who knows how many new drones will be out there in a few weeks. In terms of how we would handle those complaints now, we would probably do a lot of advising and reminding people of FAA regulations. I suppose depending on the nature of the violation and if it was repeated after being warned, we could get into the criminal world of trespassing or criminal harassment, but that would be a reach in a lot of cases, and I'm not sure how the courts would react. This isn't a high priority for me, but I respect the forethought in considering it. These general non-zoning bylaws that are only enforceable by a fine don't historically have a consistent enforcement action here, which may also affect my general position towards bylaws like this. But yes, once something is a problem, it's nice to have an enforcement mechanism in place. A couple of thoughts to consider if this is moving forward. At some point of a violation is the seizure of a drone for a period of time an appropriate response. I say not knowing the legality or constitutionally of it, just a thought. Also, I know that our East Long Meadow Police Department drone may not meet the definition of a private drone, but if it does, some sort of clear exemption for public safety drones operating in the course of their duties would be appreciated. Mark Williams, the police chief. So that was just a general update, and I think it tends to align with the discussion that the council had at that time, but I wanted to bring it back in case anyone had any additional comments, questions, concerns, or wanted to revisit the stance that the council had.
Some of the comment that I thought of after the meeting, after we had discussed this was, and it probably won't come up now and it may not come for like another 10 or 15 years, but I think it'll be interesting when we might have to face regulating like deliveries via drone or in fact if public safety or like healthcare or something, drones are used in that capacity. And I feel like same thing with like where electric cars were maybe 20 or 30 years ago. This might be something we might probably eventually have to face if we don't face it this year or at this point to just regulate those things.
Right. The only other thing I thought of since we had discussed it, of course, it was kind of like the ARPA word there was that it came up in the news, of course, with the drones flying over the earth and so forth. But it also just kind of, I think, reiterated or reinforced to me that if larger government entities beyond East Long Meadow, like states and federal, have a difficult time determining what these things are and who's operating them, and if they're following the rules, that it would be very difficult for our town to try to enforce that stuff.
I think it's a good sign that it's been a couple weeks since Christmas, and we got their drones from Santa, and no issues.
So you didn't see the forum today?
They had a huge one on the forum. Oh, no, I don't participate. I'm just joking. Gossip. I'm just joking. Was there an issue?
Not a town sanctioned site.
No issues whatsoever. I didn't see any.
I just saw the picture.
So through the chair, if we choose, which I believe we've pretty much already stated, not to take this up at this time. This doesn't preclude whether it be the planning board or someone else down the road from bringing it to us where if we had gone forwards with it and voted it down, then it would be 2 years before they could bring it back. So I think it's basically it's good for us just to put it off and see if there's an issue. And I'm sure Chief Williams will be surprised if it is, and then we'll go from there.
I agree.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no comments, we'll move on to new business. So we have discussion of proposed assisted living zoning bylaw.
Still, yeah.
Yep.
Good evening.
Good
evening.
Sorry for comfy back there.
My name is William LaPlante, owner of LaPlante Construction, also a property owner in town, almost a lifelong resident in town as well. So I own a piece of land in the Industrial Garden Parkway. And as we were looking at different uses for that land, I had some individuals come forward looking to do an assisted living memory care type facility. As I started looking into the zoning table, noticed that although nursing homes, medical facilities, hospitals are all allowed in the Industrial Garden Parkway, assisted living was not allowed. So I talked to Rob about it. I talked to a few other people in town, and just about everyone I spoke with agreed that amending the table to allow for assisted living, memory care, convalescent home in the Industrial Garden Parkway under a special permit, so that the planning board still has the ability to look to see if the project is appropriate or not for the proposed location. Thought that would be a good idea. So we scheduled an appointment with the planning board, and the planning board made a unanimous recommendation to amend the table with a special permit for assisted living, convalescent memory care facility. We've done a lot of research on the need with the aging population and the need to try to service our aging population in town and keep a facility like this close to town. Interestingly, on Benton Drive, there are a couple of facilities in the same neighborhood, if you will, but that's where the zone transitions into residential, which is an allowed usage under residential. So that's what I'm here for.
Great. I think in terms of just a clarified process too, so this was something that the planning board had simply provided us as a letter of recommendation or support, but they hadn't taken a formal action on it or hold public hearings.
Correct.
On it. So at this point, it's not a first reading and we haven't really officially started the process. This is just us offering any comments or input. But if we are to move forward with this, it would have to go back to the planning board for them to hold a public hearing and make any proposed zoning changes that would then come to the council, and then we would continue it from there. So that was the process aspect. Does any counselor have any comments or questions?
So should we read the letter from the planning board into the record?
Sure.
Who would like to do that, John?
I can read.
Would you like it?
I have it.
Okay.
Dear Mr. President, at their December 17, 2024 meeting, the planning board voted to issue a letter of support for the zoning amendment proposed by William LaPlante, owner of land in the affected zoning district, Industrial Garden Park, in which the proponent seeks to amend the schedule of use regulations, table 3-1, to allow for convalescent assisted living, congregate, elderly, handicapped housing, or nursing home by special permit in the Industrial Garden Park zoning district. The planning board is not the proponent for this amendment, but wishes to express its unanimous support for the zoning amendment. East Long Meadow and surrounding communities have an aging population, and assisted living facilities are becoming more needed. The board hopes that the town council will consider moving this proposal forward and to jumpstart the public hearing processes. On behalf of the board, Robert Wachilla, Director of Planning.
Thank you for reading that.
So through the chair.
Sure.
I completely and totally agree with the planning board. I think this change would benefit the town, and I, for one, think that we should move it along to the planning board so that they can consider it and hold their public hearing.
I also think that the way that it's being approached doesn't change the zone for the property. It just allows an additional use for the property. And so, you know, I get concerned when we start taking our industrial garden park land and use it for other things, and then there's not that land available when we have manufacturing issues or which are not eligible anyplace else in town. So I think it's a good fit.
I have a slightly different take. I definitely agree with the.
Are we surprised?
I'm actually surprised you didn't.
We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a valuable use and something that the town needs. I am a little concerned about adding it as an allowed use to our industrial zone as a use, considering that's not really where people tend to habitate today. And I know it was definitely a big concern of people like at the Fields of Chestnut when there was a warehouse proposed there on Chestnut Street. And although that was a residential area, but it was right next to an industrial sort of parcel and existing section of town. And so I do get a little concerned that if now this is something that could spread throughout the industrial garden park area, that we would only exacerbate potential issues of having people living next to other loud or industrial kinds of uses that may be disruptive to residential activity. Of course, it's tough because I do see like where your parcel is, and I don't have a problem with it being there, but we have to look at the zone as a whole. And I think that's a pretty large one of town to be.
Yeah, and when you look at the Industrial Garden Parkway and what's available and where this could happen, and that's where the protection comes in under the special permit, that if it were next to an intense industrial use, then it may not make sense. When you look at the uses along that corridor currently and some that are under construction right now, it's consistent with a facility like this. When you look at the dental, the medical, some of the other offices, obviously having the two large assisted or elderly care, again, right in that, not in the district, but literally abutting that district. So that was the thought in talking with the planning board and talking with Rob, that under a special permit, it allows it if it's deemed appropriate in that specific location.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the only other thing, with Tom's blessing, I had reached out to our director of assessing, Diane Bishop, because I knew that some other previous projects like the East Long Meadow Skilled Nursing Home was partially tax exempt. And so I was also wondering if we start now allowing residential uses, especially of assisted, or memory care type things, if that's now potentially, I'm not suggesting that it would, but that there could be a risk in the future that our industrial garden park commercial tax base could slowly get hollowed out if any of these kinds of uses are by nature tax exempt with the way that those operations are run or structured. Your potential use probably isn't, but by her explanation, it's only because those properties and those tenants have a possessory interest and it's a voluntary stay, and they have a reasonable expectation of privacy because they have separate, like locked quarters and stuff. But if that deviates and it starts to become a little bit more communal in nature, I don't know, that's definitely something that I worry about. I do think it's still worth, moving it to the planning board and seeing what their thoughts are, but I'm just a little hesitant to start moving residential and potential tax exempt uses into our commercial base in town. Does anyone have any other comments or questions?
Do you happen to know if any other communities have adopted the similar sort of site permit use for industrial garden park? Or has this become, might be maybe a question maybe for Rob to research perhaps, if other communities have done this?
I'm I'm unaware of that. Again, I just look at the existing corridor there. When you look at what's there, it's
Got kind of adjacent.
it's a very appropriate use for what's there. It's not an industrial, a traditional industrial zone that you would see with heavy industrial.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are
There are,
additional industrial.
yeah, it's a very eclectic mix, you know, purposely so with the Industrial Garden Parkway zone.
I would definitely be kind of open to it at first impression looking at it, so.
Through the chair.
Sure.
I kind of really appreciate your comments. Bill, more curious and just, I know it's just like an initial, more like as a concept, if you have like 3 or 4 dwellings, is under the management of the same healthcare provider? If you have like 3 or 4 freestanding homes, like how does like the, I guess, a business work?
So on this particular project, it would be a single building on the parcel.
Gotcha.
Under, you know, privately owned payer that, you know, would be providing the services.
Like in the proposal, the long-term goal is to build 3 to 4 homes locally, not so much in that same area, but maybe in different areas.
Right. We're looking at different communities.
Anything else? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to refer the proposed assisted living zoning bylaw amendment to the planning board for recommendation to the town council.
I'll second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? None. Jim?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
John?
I mean, yes.
And Kathy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Bill.
Next, under new business, we have discussion of proposed amendment to the charter regarding multiple bylaw changes simultaneously. Ralph?
What? So I have, obviously in our charter section, Article 9, Section 9.3, mandates that once every 10 years, we look at our general bylaws for either the ability for recodification, review, removal of bylaws that are no longer necessary, the addition, but a full review. So with that being said, that has to be done on every year ending in a 5, we start the process. So having recently gone through the codification process, we ended up changing the charter when we did the codification because there was literally hundreds, 100, more than 100 changes. Hundreds of changes that were made. And currently our charter says that we can only make one change at a time. So you would hold a public hearing for the one change, you would vote on that, go to the next change. So if we had to follow it for the regular codification, we were talking 100 or more public hearings. So seeing that and realizing that, I remembered that the language that we put into the charter was specifically and only dated for that particular codification, not thinking about the process that has to happen every 10 years and that there may have to be multiple changes. There probably will be. I've had a chance to talk a little bit with our planning director, who's extremely excited and has multiple changes. So my thought process was to amend the language that we had voted on, that the town had voted on to accept in the charter, to allow this process once every 10 years when we do this review to be able to accept multiple changes at once. Our process is just like the codification. If there's any substantial changes, we keep those separate. And so we go through the list of them. And if there's any that are, we're not sure of or whatever, you set that out. And then we vote on those separately and can vote on the rest as one whole at one time. Anna, question? I know you have a question.
No, I mean, it makes sense.
So I attempted to adjust the language to reflect this. I'm not an English major. That's why this is strictly a draft. And I am open for any suggestions. I know there's a process through the chair, if you don't mind my asking. Jeannie, we talked a little bit today. This looks like it's got to move forwards pretty quick because it's got to go to the AG. It's got to go, our attorney's got to review it. The AG's got 4 weeks and
Then we need it 5 weeks before the election.
so do you want me to read what we have, or do you guys just want to look through it and make suggestions? Do you want to send to our attorney to get his thoughts on it?
I feel the town attorney should review it first and then bring it before the council when it's already been reviewed by the town attorney. Then it can, the proposed, approved by 2/3 can go to the AG's office to start the review process.
Yeah, I'm happy to have the town's attorney review it, but maybe after any potential like thoughts or tweaks that the council might have, just so we're not like
right
multiple times. I overall think, just my thought on the draft, I think it's good, kind of like as a minimum for I think what we need for the general bylaw review process every 10 years and moving forward, especially with this year that we have to do it. But I kind of struggle with that in the charter in general. Like I understand the reason for not wanting the ability for the council to just kind of do what the state or the federal government does and have these huge omnibus bills that just shove all sorts of stuff together and nobody knows what's in it. But at the same time, I almost wonder if we should make it a little more flexible for the council, maybe requiring a supermajority vote where if we felt that there were other matters, which we've had some over the last few years, that we've ended up having to split out into multiple hearings over the course of the year. Sometimes I think there could be efficiencies there if we thought up front that, yes, we should allow ourselves to package a couple of these together and move forward instead of it just being a once every 10-year process. But it's just a thought.
So through the chair, so currently we allow one issue at a time to be addressed. The thought process was in the past, before the change in government and all, we found that they were grouping multiple things together. A few people were grouping multiple things together, taking one vote and boom. And you may not have liked 4 of them and they only liked 1. And that's why it was, hey, let's address one item. Let's make sure that one's good and go forwards. I do understand what you're saying now. And a lot of times there's 2 or 3 items that you're like, these are no brainers. We should just vote on them all at once. But I do think that's also a different part of the charter that we have to look at changing. And I think that would probably be a separate question based on the locations.
Also, I apologize if you mentioned this, but you're looking to take out the codification section and replace it with this, correct?
You can either take it out or you can replace the wording. There's probably 20 words that have changed in it. So again, I don't know what's the easiest. I don't know if it's to say, remove this paragraph and put this one in or change this wording within it. And again, I think that would be our attorney would tell us the best way to go.
I think removing it because that codification was put in there for a specific purpose.
Specific date.
So now that is not necessary. So take that one out and put this one in. That's just my thoughts.
Tom?
If you could, we sort of internally working the problem as far as you can, and then the attorney looks at it. It's sort of the last thing so that you're not bouncing it back and forth to the attorney every time there's an amendment. If that's okay with you, if you could get sort of what you would call a final product, then we give it to the attorney, and then inevitably he'll have changes anyway that you'll have to discuss and change again. But it seems to work better if we get as close to final as you would like to see before we get it to the attorney.
So, John, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, more just kind of a comment. I mean, I think it's a pretty good idea in the sense of if we can kind of make things more efficient. There's a lot of things that we discuss sometimes quite at length, which I think is really great. Then there's sometimes where there's things that we all collectively know in 5 seconds we'll probably be able to get done. But I think the idea of maybe having like a supermajority vote, it protects the minority interest of maybe saying, hold on, let's kind of put the brakes on this. So if it's something like 2/3 or, you know, whatever it is, I think would be something definitely we should maybe consider putting in if we're going to do something, multiple things at once. So I think it's a good idea. But I'd like to see what the town attorney thinks. It's obviously, you know, if there's major problems.
So would the pleasure of the council be we bring this matter back up at our next meeting this month on January 28th, and that'll give people time to think about it and if we have any suggested changes.
So if we have change like we were talking, that would be a separate question, a separate portion of the charter. Maybe, you know, if we choose to go that route, it would be to change that from must vote on one topic to we got to wordsmith that portion, which would be a separate question.
Yeah, and maybe we don't undertake it, but at least we could just make sure we're all good with the language you have here for that particular section. And then if there was something else that we wanted to tackle at the same time, if we've already got to go through the process. That'll give us 2 weeks to think about it. Yeah. Okay, so we'll to be continued on that one.
I mean, 20 minutes wasn't enough.
Okay, so then our next topic under new business was the capital stabilization fund policy. So this was something that was an action item that came out of us approving the creation of the new capital stabilization fund at our previous meeting in December. So if anyone had any particular language changes or suggestions that they might like to see in that policy to tighten up the language was the suggestion. I don't have anything in particular myself, but if anyone has anything, happy to discuss.
So through the chair, I will.
Sure.
So I was not at the December meeting. And I just had a couple questions. I know within the capital stabilization fund, it says annually at a minimum $100,000 will be set aside. Is that a legal requirement? Is that a requirement that we set as an amount to set aside?
That's just
the policy.
Own policy that Tom would include in the budget, but could potentially happen this upcoming year. We don't necessarily have to adhere to the policy if we determine that.
So we put 100,000 in the regular stabilization fund in the budget. Same with OPEB.
So
75,000.
So it's a policy and not a requirement based on how we set up the fund.
Right.
I don't remember the specific vote, but I don't think you set it up like that.
Okay. I just.
It's not required. It's
just our policy, which we try to adhere to.
You could change it so that it does not say at a minimum, so that you're not required to put 100,000 in it based on the policies. It's really policies up to us. It's not required.
I mean, yes, we should have a goal of putting something aside, but it's sort of like the sidewalk fund. There were some years that there was no money.
Right.
And I'm concerned going forwards that we're going to have a few tight years, especially after listening to earlier this evening. So I would suggest that we consider either removing the 100,000 as a whole or lowering it and saying, 25 or 50,000. That would be my first suggestion. My second suggestion would be that we have a stabilization fund. Maybe adjust some of the language. So my idea on the capital stabilization was to have a little kitty set aside for municipal structures. The municipal structure part being that we know the police department's going to need it. We know the fire department's going to, we can tell the DPW is going to. And if we have extra funds to be able to set a little bit aside, I'm not saying it's gonna pay for the building, because it's not. We'll never get to that point. But what it may do is we may have, 100,000 to 300,000 in there to help offset the initial cost to do like the engineering or something like that. And that's what I was hoping would be the capital stabilization. Now, under stabilization, we could adjust the wording a little bit. Right now, it's for to mitigate emergencies or other unanticipated events that cannot be supported by the current general fund. I mean, we can remove like that so that the regular stabilization fund, again, we want to keep at least 8% in it, but if we go above it, that could be used to offset any capital needs that we have and keep this capital stabilization fund for municipal buildings. And by buildings, I mean renovations, major renovations, additions, new construction, anything like that. That was my thought.
Yeah, and I think we put the 100 in there because that was sort of what we had on the other ones. And in the event that, say, we couldn't fund that this year, I guess I'll go as far as to say it wouldn't be the first time the town of East Long Meadow was outside of their East Long Meadow policy.
We don't like to be. It's a shoot.
No, of course. Again, and I see that the wording makes it seem like we really have to do this, and if we don't, like,
right.
And again, there were no really suggestions from me following the conversation on the 10th. I guess we kind of left it again to your pleasure, right? Everything that comes out of there is going to require your vote. So if you don't like what we're asking, then you say no. Whether that's buildings or, some other capital item that came up that we didn't necessarily know about, or we had more needs than we thought we were going to need for a certain year, in a capital year.
Yeah.
Again,
that's why I thought, hey, we'll just have a little separate bank account, knowing we have the stabilization and knowing that. I've seen the list of capital projects. They're never ending. So
they won't ever end.
Instead of, putting the money aside for a regular capital project, it seems you can use it that year. I mean, there's always a list of 50, 100 of them. Whereas something like this may only come up hopefully once every 20, 30 years, but chances are, looking at our infrastructure, we'll probably need more. And again, I don't know the thoughts and concerns of the rest of the board.
Kim, I know you had
So on the question about the 100,000, I mean, I think some of the policies actually read the town will strive to annually raise and appropriate rather than saying that we will. At a minimum. And then.
So we'll strive.
100,000.
Love it.
But if we can't afford it that year, then we don't do it that year.
Yeah. Adding strive in works.
Strive. It's a good word.
That's a good.
Strive to annually put in. Yeah, that.
Great. Any other comments or questions, Kathy?
Yes, I would echo Ralph's comment about using this fund to focus on municipal buildings as the need might arise. I think if we don't isolate that definition, then we allow the fund to just be a backup for the annual capital improvement plan.
And if we adjust the wording slightly under the stabilization, that could be the backup plan for regular capital.
Right.
So would you like, we'll revise this then for the 28th maybe and see if you like the language better and leave it just for municipal building capital outlay.
Yes.
capital outlay. Municipal building capital outlay regarding construction, renovation, because I don't want like the Council of Aging to come and say, we need new furniture for this room.
No, of course. Of course. Well, maybe capital's not appropriate because that's 25,000. So you're talking about a certain amount of an expenditure, right?
And again, I don't want to set that just only because I'm thinking engineering or whatever, although engineering, I've seen the cost. Just heritage.
10% was bad and they're at 15% now. All right, we can
maybe just saying building
wordsmith
projects because we kind of use that terminology with the high school. It's a high school building project as opposed to furniture. That other adornments.
Again, I'm not an English major. Not even close.
We'll see what we can do.
Yes, I'm sure because
I mean Rebecca.
Strive either.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
No.
Okay, moving on. Action items for our next meeting. So we have 2 public hearings of continuation of the solar. We have now the continuation of ADUs. We also now have the charter amendment that we'll discuss again. And that's as far as I know at the moment.
Motorola contract,
Oh, right, Motorola.
Jeannie.
And then review the revised capital stabilization fund policy.
So Connor, as far as the charter language, do you want me to try to put something together based on instead of one item, multiple items, or I'll reach out to you?
Yeah, that's fine, because I'll didn't search. That was just a cursory thought, but I didn't have any words behind it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Like I said, that way there will come back with something and instead of just handing out charters to everyone,
Yeah.
saying, okay, let's wordsmith.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, and next we do have an executive session.
I was just,
sure.
Potential action item to maybe consider once we start sort of going into the fiscal budget season with sort of conversations with the schools and looking at maybe potentially looking at our revenue side of things. It might not be a bad idea for maybe the 7 of us to have some type of, I don't know, maybe if it's a primer or a workshop or something like this to maybe go over the structure of the budget and just kind of give more information on how the budget works, where we could kind of look at things, especially with revenue or expenses. It might not be a bad idea to have some type of, I don't know, maybe it could just fit into our regular meeting schedule, something, I don't know what the logistics would necessarily look like, but maybe something to, before we sort of open into the financial oversight committee. So.
Yeah, we definitely are going to dive into that come February.
February is going to be. I see it.
We're talking about the budget till June, so just swing by.
Is that an open invitation?
Yeah. For most.
Okay. So we do have an executive session. I move that we enter into executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3 for the following purpose: to discuss strategy with respect to pending litigation with Gianna Driscoll versus the town of East Long Meadow et al. If the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the board or town's litigating position, and I declare that and we will return to open session afterwards.
Second.
To adjourn, or are you returning?
Returning to open session.
To adjourn, or we be taking?
I don't think we know enough to say that we can adjourn this time. Is there a second?
Second.
He seconded it.
Okay.
Further discussion.
Yes.
So I just want to disclose for the public that I have had a past business relationship. I own a landscape company. I have done work for this family a few years ago. But at this time, I don't think that would affect any of my decisions and in executive session.
Thank you for the disclosure. Okay, to move into executive session, Jim?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Kathy?
Yes.